Hello Mrs. Frost's third hour English class.
Our topic today is The Stranger by Albert Camus.
Let's start off by looking at France during the time this novel was published, 1942, shortly after World War II.
France took most of the damage from the war. The war led to major destruction of French property. France was destroyed physically and mentally.
To wrap their heads around the war, many people turned to existentialism and other philosophies. Albert Camus had his own philosophy, which was presented in The Stranger,
which is
absurdism. As Albert Camus explains, what is the absurd? It is, as may quite easily be seen, that I, a rational being, must act in a case where my reason, my powers of reflection, tell me, you can just as well do the one thing as the other, that is to say where my reason and reflection say, you cannot act, and yet here is where I have to act.
What does that mean?
Absurdism is the conflict between the human tendency to seek value in life and the human inability to find any. Basically, it is the absurdity in which the meaning to life cannot be found.
Well, where does one go from there?
Camus presents three different options or reactions to this confrontation. First is suicide. Pretty simple, can't explain your existence. End it. Camus disagrees with this option as well as the second, which is philosophical suicide, abandoning reason and ignorantly believing in a transcendence for sake of simplicity. The final option is acceptance. Accept the absurdity of life, and find peace through the absurd.
Just as Meursault does at the end of the novel.
Yes. That also brings up another difficult concept, nihilism. This concept is one of which Camus has said to spend his entire life battling. Meursault is a nihilist as well as an existentialist.
Whoa! What is nihilism and existentialism?
Existentialism is the pursuit for meaning in life, and nihilism is the belief that nothing truly exists, or even matters. Life is meaningless and void.
Wow. That's intense.
Albert Camus said that his life is devoted to opposing the philosophy of nihilism while still delving deeply into individual freedom. Going back to the novel, there are other dominant themes or concepts, such as determinationism, which is the idea that everything is already predetermined. Free will, society, alienation, and the value of the physical world versus metaphysical. Really, it boils down to the absurdity of life, which is presented in three main contradictions: Meursault's alienation from society and misunderstanding of him by society, predetermination versus free will, and lastly the physical world and the metaphysical world.
I see. The transition of Meursault in prison seems to be the prime example of absurdism and the conflict of society versus the individual. At first, being in the prison, Meursault is unaffected and even says, "At the time, I often thought that if I had had to live in the trunk of a dead tree, with nothing to do but look up at the sky flowing overhead, little by little I would have gotten used to it." Part 2, Chapter 2, pg. 77. He seems to not care that he's going to die or that he is no longer free. After the trial, he accepts his death and the absurdity of society and life. As if that blind rage has washed me clean, rid me of hope. For the first time, I that night alive with signs and stars, I opened myself to the gentle indifference of the world. Finding it so much life myself, so like a brother, really, I felt that I had been happy and that I was happy again. For everything to be consummated, for me to feel less alone, I had only to wish that there be a large crowd of spectators the day of my execution and that they greet me with cries of hate. Part 2, Chapter 5, pg. 122-3.
Very good. This is the most prevalent theme in the novel. The idea of Meursault being a stranger or outcast. In fact, the translation of the French word étranger has several meanings, which are foreign, unknown, extraneous, alien, unconnected, outsider, or stranger. All of which fall under traits of Meursault.
Also the quote. In a way, they seem to be arguing the case as if it had nothing to do with me. Everything was happening without my participation. My fate was being decided without anyone so much as asking my opinion. Part 2, Chapter 4, pg. 98 falls in line with Meursault being a stranger.
It also brings up the idea of free will versus predetermination. Most of the events happen irrationally or without cause. Meursault might feel that there is nothing he can do to stop this, that he has no free will.
What about the physical world versus the metaphysical?
The physical world is placed with high esteem by Meursault, as he spends most of his time observing everything. His relationship with Marie is based solely on physical intimacy.
Thus following Meursault's views in the beginning of the novel.
Yes. Hope you enjoyed this video presentation.
Finn.